So, during the past month, I read the least amount of books and pages within the past 2 years. Yet again, didn't pick up a book that came up on the TBR for the second time in the span of a year. Started the second book in the series only to realize that I don't remember the vast majority of book 1 and need to reread it first. DNF'd a book recommended by a favorite author, and DNF'd one of the most popular series in the booktube community. Sorry if you're hearing background noise, my windows are open and I'm filming this very important video, yet people continue to live. The audacity. Hello fellow readers and readeresses. May was a mess, a big mess, and on top of that, my May TBR was an even bigger mess with 9 books and over 5,000 pages to be read. And let's be honest, some of those books require way more brain power than I can spare on most days, so from the beginning it was very clear that I won't be able to read all of the books, but honestly I was genuinely hoping for a better performance. And we'll get to all that went wrong with my reading in due time, but first, as always, let's quickly look at the TBR I was working with. We had Warhost of Vastmark. I swear, one of these days I will pronounce the title of this book correctly, which was a series-style landing, followed by The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, which was a bookshelf jar pick, Carrie, which was a prompt cards pick to read a book, the name of the author of which starts with the same letter as mine, The Wise Man's Fear, which was another prompt cards pick to read the highest rated book on my TBR, Empire of Silence, which was another prompt cards pick to read a buddy read book, To the Lighthouse, which was another bookshelf jar pick, Lord of Chaos, which was another series-style landing, The Big Nowhere, which was a prompt cards pick to read a book recommended by a favorite author, and the last one was The Devils, which was a free choice for completing the map. So yeah, clearly, no way I could have gone through all of these within a single month and not lost my mind, and let's look at the casualties. The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley. I swear to God, one of these days I will read this book. I just didn't want to right now because it's a fall book, I think, and I just started feeling the summer vibes. Sorry for saying vibes, I don't know where that came from. Anyway, I didn't even open it, and I hope we meet again at a better time. The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Who's surprised? I'm not. So the thing is, besides being gigantic, this is also book 2 in the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I did actually start reading it, but within very few pages I realized that I'd forgotten the vast majority of book 1, and being that I was already overwhelmed, I decided to drop it for now and reread The Name of the Wind before I give this one another go. Good bad news is that there's no real danger of book 3 coming out anytime soon, so there's no actual hurry. Next we have a DNF, and that is The Big Nowhere by James Ellroy. This is an adult crime, noir, thriller, etc., and the second book in the LA Quartet series. Now, here's the thing. I was really excited about this book, not just because it was recommended by Joe Abercrombie himself, who's one of my favorite authors, but also because I love the genre and I was really looking for that mood. But then I opened the book and it was a bit different from what I expected. It's set in the 50s in LA, and there's all kinds of talk about commies and pinkos, whatever those are, and I just wasn't feeling it. Partially because I wasn't really looking for something as political, and partially because I'm not as familiar with the geopolitical situation of the US at the time, so a lot of the context might have been lost on me. Now granted, I only gave the book a few pages, and I've been told that this might not be the best place to start with the author, so while I'm DNFing the book, it's only a temporary DNF, and I plan on eventually coming back to it. Alright, let's do this. There's one more book I DNF'd in May, and with it, the entire series. And as I already mentioned, it's one of the most beloved in the booktube community. But honestly, continuing it for me is useless at best. So at about 60%, I DNF'd Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan. And yes, I know you're shocked and appalled, but before you call me all kinds of crazy and storm off, let me explain. I didn't hate the book. It's actually one of the better ones in the series. I was really enjoying Matt's point of view, and I really liked where Rand's storyline was going. It was getting really disturbing, and that's my jam. And I also very much enjoyed where Elaine was going with some of her research. I find that to be very, very interesting. But I just can't stand the way this story is written, not just in this book, in general in this series. I can't possibly witness another repetitive, inconsequential, long overdrawn inner monologue about loving someone who's supposedly too stupid to get it. I can't get through another painfully detailed description of a dress or a vest or the ruffles on the sleeve of a shirt of a guy we'll only see for a page, if that. And if I have to read another sentence about a named inn and its named innkeeper and his plump cook and or plump wife who is brandishing a wooden spoon, or another article of domestic weaponry and yelling after the airhead serving girls, or about another bad musician singing a song about something ridiculous that is known under different names and with different lyrics in the different regions, and about the stupid different dances that are supposed to accompany it, I will lose my mind and burn this house down. I mean, how many named inns can you possibly need in a book? There's like at least 5 in chapter 5 alone. Is there not another way for us to receive information? Is there not another setting that can be used? Why does it always have to be the same type of settings with the same type of things happening in them, always described to us in way greater detail that could possibly be reasonable? I swear to God, this author has single-handedly managed to make me hate inns with burning passion. And I know all I just said sounds a bit over-exaggerated, and that hating inns, especially when you're reading fantasy books, is a bit ridiculous because it's a rather standard setting. I get that. But everything has limits, and this has been building up for quite some time now. These are just a few things that I can put my finger on and point out, but there are so many more other things that are just filler and keep on repeating over and over again in the same style and fashion and way, much like the turning of the wheel, some might say. Except it's not fun to read. I feel like I'm stuck in this Groundhog Day type of situation where I keep on reading the same chapter seemingly over and over again. I just ultimately think I really dislike Robert Jordan's overly detailed writing style. I feel suffocated by it on every single page. Like he's writing this very interesting story, but he's purposefully denying me that story by throwing all of this irrelevant nonsense at me all the time. Let me give you an analogy to try and help you understand. Imagine you're watching this amazing movie. The storyline is fantastic, you're hooked, you want to know so much more. But for every 3 minutes of movie, you're forced to watch 4 minutes of the worst unskippable ad. That one ad you can't stand. I know you have one of these. If you've been on the internet, you have one ad that you hate with burning passion. That's the one. For 3 minutes of movie, 4 minutes of that ad. That's how I feel reading this entire series. The plot is amazing. The world is amazing. I want to know so much more. But for every few pages of actually interesting story, I'm forced to endure at least twice as many pages of just the most soul-crushingly boring filler. This for me has been going on since book 2 in the series, and while in the beginning those things are tiny and inconsequential and mildly irritating at worst, with time they pile up until eventually they become unbearable, and I can't do this anymore. I am near constantly frustrated while reading this, and if that's how I feel with one of the best books in the series, how am I gonna get through the alleged slog that's coming after? And I'm gonna say what shouldn't need to be said, but what I feel is important to remind people every now and then, especially on the internet. If you love this book in this series, I don't begrudge you the right to do so, nor think less of you for that. There's plenty to love about it. But for a long time now, I have advocated for people dropping the books that don't do it for them because life is short and there's plenty else to read. And for a long time, I have made a hypocrite of myself by continuing to force myself to read these books. Partially because I wanted to be a part of the hype, and partially because I didn't want people to think less of me. But honestly, I don't really think people think of me all that much, and if they did, and this is what made them think less of me, well, that's a bit silly, and I guess I'm okay with it. I feel quite good about my decision, and while we never know what's gonna happen in the future, I am for the time being DNFing Lord of Chaos, and with that, the Wheel of Time series. And before we get to the books I actually finished in May, I will briefly mention two books that I'm still reading. The first of which is The War Host of Vastmark by Janny Wirtz. Yes, I am still reading this. Please don't judge me. It's been a tough month for my fantasy reading, but I am about 75% through it, and I am planning on having it finished this week. And the second book is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. This is the first book in the Sun Eater series, and I am about 50% through it, and I'm having a great time so far. There's a lot to talk about in relation to it, but we'll do it in my June wrap-up, or maybe even sooner. Stay tuned. And now, finally, let's talk about the books I finished in May in the order in which I finished them. Starting with Carrie by Stephen King. This is an adult horror / paranormal thriller, and I believe it's the first work published by the author. Please don't quote me on that. It follows a young woman with some very special skills, and we get several accounts by people who communicated with her or got to witness events caused by her. The whole thing is told a bit like a retrospective account of the events, and I really like that. Stephen King does a lot of things well, but his original and interesting method of delivery usually does half the job of making his stories one of a kind. I also really like the setting and the mystery and the creepy atmosphere. I think that was done fantastically. Is fantastically a word? Who cares? What I didn't like about the book is what I usually end up not liking about Stephen King books. For one, I felt like the ending was a bit overplayed, like he had a good idea, but he didn't necessarily know where to go with it. And the second thing was his affinity for portraying and discussing matters of intimate and sexual nature, often in an abusive way, specifically related to children and young teenagers. And it's not that I don't think these topics should be discussed in books, I just almost always get this very uncomfortable feeling when I read his writings. It's like he almost always takes a few steps too far. And I know what some of you will say right now. Well, actually, that's the point. Fine. That might be the point. But the point can't make me forget that I'm reading about the very intimate, very sexual thoughts of a 15-year-old girl written by a 30-year-old man in the way that he wrote them. Or that I'm reading about the first period experienced by a young girl written by the same man, portraying one of the most intimate female experiences in a crass and frankly vulgar way. And I know, other women have read it and they've been okay with it, and that's fine because I'm not speaking for all women. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm allowed to not like things, right? Look at me inventing an argument and having it on camera. Now, I know that Stephen King is a lot of people's favorite author, and I can completely understand why. The man is a genius. He has written so many fantastic stories. I mean, Misery is one of the best things I've ever read in my entire life. And I remember reading, was it The Dead Zone, when I was 15 years old, and being completely mind blown to this day, even though I don't entirely remember the plot, so I might have to reread that one. Regardless, my point is, I understand the instinct to come and defend your favorite author in front of me, to try and justify his reasons for writing what he wrote. And you don't have to do that, all right? I understand that he had reasons. I understand that he had a vision and he executed it the way that he wanted to. I'm just saying that I didn't like it. I wish it wasn't there, or that it was written in a different way. It doesn't have to be objectively bad for me to dislike it. I just dislike it in my soul. That's it. Man, this entire video is just me yelling at people's favorite books, isn't it? Anyway, after all this useless ranting, I gave the book 3.5 stars. Sorry if the angle has changed, I had to get up and take a call, so the setup is all messed up now. The second book I finished in May is actually a book that I secretly read for the first time about 2 months ago and then reread in May for a video project, and that is The Bloodstones by Tori Tecken. This is an adult East Asian inspired epic fantasy and the first book in the Legends of the Bruhai series. I have a full video dedicated to it, so I won't spend too much time talking about it right now, but just know that it's fantastic. It features very interesting characters and relationships and will probably surprise you. It's also self-published by one of the most fantastic booktubers I've ever known, so if you're interested in something like that, I would highly recommend it. Book number 3 for the month kind of surprised me because I honestly didn't think I'd get to it in May at all, and that is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is a rather popular classic about people trying to understand who they are to themselves, who we are to each other as people in general, and overall it's so beautiful that I don't even know how to really describe it. So I I won't. But you'll either love it or be bored to death by it, and I guess it all depends on where you are in life when you read it. I found it so lovely, despite the rather outdated societal structures and understandings portrayed in it, or maybe partially because of it. We have a family and their various acquaintances who all kind of hang out with each other, but all of them alone in their heads. They all see the same thing, but perceive it differently, all of them trying to fight their vague demons. It was beautiful. I picked it up one day kind of casually, assuming I'd just sniff around and likely skip it for the month, but then it grabbed me, and I can't really tell you what it was exactly that did it. It was so melancholic, and I guess I was ready to wallow, but didn't have anything immediate to wallow about, so this gave me the perfect opportunity. I liked it quite a lot, actually. I gave it 4.3 stars, and I'm really looking forward to reading more by Virginia Woolf. And the fourth and last book I read in May was The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is an adult epic fantasy and the first book in the series that carries the same title. It's quite a new release, actually, being that it came out on the 14th or 15th of May, I can't remember anymore. I picked it up the day after it became available on Amazon, and it started really well. We have an alternative Earth setting with some nice similarities and some rather fun differences. The book actually made me smile even before it truly began, because once I opened it and naturally went straight to the map page, this is what I saw. This is where I'm from, or at least the real world version of it. I know it's a small thing, but I don't get to see Bulgaria in books very often, and why would I? So seeing it in a fantasy book written by one of my favorite authors tickled me quite a lot. So, alternative Earth, kind of a medieval setting, a motley crew of various monsters and other weirdos, a lost princess, a bunch of terrible relatives who are trying to kill her, a quest to restore the monarchy of a legendary city/empire, all kinds of nice things. And I generally quite enjoyed it. The plot was interesting, the characters were likable, the world was very fun. It's actually one of my favorite aspects, next to the writing, obviously, which was, as always, impeccable. I swear to God, Joe Abercrombie has to be one of my top 3 authors in terms of dialogue. He had such a nice dynamic going on between the characters, for the most part at least, and I'll touch on it a bit later. Actually, let's touch on it right now. I had a slight issue with the overabundant focus on the romantical content, and I say overabundant, but you realize that everything is relative, and I mean in the context of this particular author. I didn't want this much focus on the intimate relationships and feelings between the different characters, because it shifted the tone of the story in a direction I didn't really like. I really dislike it when authors try to pair up everyone in the crew with somebody else. It's really annoying. And I think generally my biggest issue with the story was its tone. It read kind of young adulty. We were seeing terrible horrors on page, that's for sure, but there were always jokes, and not in the fatalistic dry way of the First Law, but in this very quirky, bantery way. I was kind of missing the dread and gloom that I'm accustomed to when reading a Joe Abercrombie book, which I suppose it's kind of unfair to expect an author to deliver a certain type of tone in all of his books. But I can't lie, I wanted it to be darker, and again, not in terms of what happened on page, but in terms of how it was delivered. It just felt a little too lighthearted and quirky for my taste. Now, despite those semi-reasonable complaints, I actually had quite a good time reading the book, and the chapter Clean Not Clean is actually one of my favorite things I've ever read. It truly shows Joe Abercrombie's ability to speak with a certain character's voice and to show us the exact experience of not being in charge of your own mind. It was fascinating, and I kind of wish more had come out of it. Anyway, I gave the book 4 stars, and honestly, had it been nearly any other author, I probably would have been way more impressed. I am just so used to Abercrombie consistently delivering great books, so I have very high expectations. So to summarize, in May of 2025, I read 4 books, which amounted to a total of 1,973 pages. By the way, in those I include the 500 pages I read from Lord of Chaos before I DNF'd it, which is one of the 2 books I DNF'd. In terms of genre, I read 1 classic, 2 fantasies, and 1 horror. In terms of formatting, I read 2 paperbacks and 2 ebooks. And in terms of sourcing, I own 3 of the books and borrowed 1. So overall, not the best reading month, but to be honest, I felt like I was in a bit of a reading slump through part of the month at least, so I'm happy that I was able to do as much as I have. And also that I was able to let go of the books that don't serve me, which has always been a bit of a difficult thing. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please let me know how was your reading month. I really hope it was better than mine. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see some of my rather weird reading experiments, check out this playlist. Bye!